You good?
Mm-hmm. This is a wobbly pillow.
Sorry. It's like $2 at Walmart. Hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of the Honesty Hour show. I still don't know what to call it, so we're just going to go in with that for now. But you clicked on it, so you at least know kind of what this is. So today's episode will be a little different. I have my mom with me today. This is Sharon Dukes. Well, you can scoot a little bit more. I'm like very worried that you're like half in the screen. We've been told we look like sisters. What say you? What are your thoughts? Just total honesty hour moment. I've had a pretty rough week for multiple reasons, but one of them knowing that my family is moving in a couple of weeks. So she came and spent the night last night. It was great. We had burgers and some donuts and watched a Walt Disney documentary. We were talking a lot about where I was at in college starting out versus where I'm at now. And I asked my mom if she'd be willing to talk with you guys for a little bit just about what she saw me go through, specifically freshman year, but like really, let's just say from senior year high school to now. And we'll start there. What was your perspective as a mother in that situation as I went through MTSU?
Well, first of all, taking you to MTSU was a hard thing, and you were going to be 4 hours away from home. That was your first time away from home, so made it challenging for me, but I just had to trust that, he was directing your steps. The first few weeks was great. It seemed like you were settling in and doing well, and then you just hit that really rough place. And I remember that one weekend that I came to see you that you were doing really bad, and I don't think I realized how bad it was. I think if I had it to do over again, you would have been coming home right then, leaving you there, and then you still watching you spiral even more. That's when, your dad and I came to the agreement that it was just best for you to come back home. That was going to be what was best for you. Just trying to get you to that good mental place and everything, and checking into the counseling, learning to see the signs of what's going on in somebody with depression. And I think we can mask things pretty well and make everybody think that we're doing really good when really we're not. We may even convince ourselves that there's no one that can really help us when that is all total lies. And I think for you, what the best thing that you did was you didn't keep it to yourself, you didn't hide it, you were crying out for help. But then it seemed like things started turning around. And the counseling we noticed was definitely doing some good. It was definitely helping you. But even your counselor was the one that said you needed medication. And I know you fought that for a little while because you just did not want to be medicated. And I was a little nervous about it. But I remember when we finally came to that decision, you were sitting in the car trembling.
Outside of that freaking apartment complex.
Yes, you were crying. You started tearing up. And it was really one of the best things that you could have done. I just immediately within a week, you said you could tell a difference, and your mind was calm, and you were more settled, and you were working real hard to get the negative stuff out of your life and bring in positive. I saw you spending more time in God's Word, which was huge. Your junior year of college is what I remember really being the turnaround point for you.
Yep.
And
it was second semester junior year because it was March. It was after stuff happened with work and after Birmingham. And I remember having a conversation with you and Dad just saying something seemed different about me. And I think I took that and ran with that because that felt like something had clicked in college, just finally made sense. And I finally fit in my body kind of thing. I mean, there was so much you said that I'd love to address and talk about. A lot of who've been with me long enough, who either walked me through that really hard time or watched me go through it or came out of it. So most of you know the story. Some of you don't if you're new. Essentially, I went out of state my first semester of college because of the major that I was going into. So I was in this little college in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I think it's realizing it so didn't fit me, but I didn't know why. And now it makes sense after what I want to do now, where I want to move now. But being there, I felt oppressed, and I still feel that way whenever I go back. It's really hard for me to go back to Nashville because of those memories. And I still remember that weekend because everything had felt semi-okay up until then. But I remember the shift, and I could see the skyline, and it suddenly Nashville didn't feel like home, and Nashville didn't feel safe. And I didn't feel safe in my body. That was the weekend of October 31st, which I never tell people this particular tattoo story over the internet or anything. If you want to know what it means, you have to talk to me in person about it. But this one, I got it in New York on October 31st, 2018. That was a really intentional move for like so many reasons, but that weekend being one of them, because that felt like a ground zero all over again. When I was at MTSU, I was so depressed I wouldn't get out of bed and like get myself water. So I'd drink like grape juice that I had left in my fridge. And I still remember like eating goldfish as my only meal for a day. I remember one week not showering for a couple of days because I felt like I couldn't bring myself to go into the community bathrooms. Those need to be burned down and done away with for good. I still remember one day I watched Friends from like 11 a.m. to 1 a.m. And that was like one of the hardest days because I just remember laying in bed, like you just feel like the weight is on top of you and you can't get out of bed. And I still remember you looking across from me that Sunday before you left, and I was like just crying, and you were telling me you have to repeat after me, and we're saying my mom loves me, my dad loves me, my brother loves me, and then you started naming off my friends, and like that month of November was still really hard. And then I remember Thanksgiving break telling Dad that it was like, yeah, I'm gonna come home, like I can't stay here. And that was hard too, because like you see all of your friends thriving in a college environment, and they're all like at their SEC schools or like meeting new friends or still friends with like all of your old friends, and you're like, I am coming back to where I started, and I'm the only person coming back. And for me, my hometown has just held lots of like negative memories. I have good memories, and I'm so thankful for those, but I still hate going back to that hometown. Felt like a really big defeat because it felt like, oh, I tried to go out and I failed kind of thing. Sophomore year and beginning of junior year were just hard in general of like trying to meet friends, and like I was doing way better, but there were still so many fears, especially where body image was concerned and body dysmorphia. And that's something I haven't talked about a lot with you guys, I think because I've never known how to talk about it, and I'm also still processing it, but it's still something I'm like, I really respect the sensitivity of this topic and wanting to address it right. You know, so there's stuff like that. And then there were relationships with guys that I had were so toxic and negative, and I just didn't see how being in those relationships with them was like causing this up and down spiral as well. So talking to my counselor, it was just this constant, like every week it's like, what's new with Emily? What's going on? But I was never ashamed to tell people that. In fact, like I make it a point to just tell people, yep, I'm on medication. Yeah, I've struggled with this. And like at this point, like that's just second nature to talk about it. I feel like I get that from Dad, because Dad is like very open about stuff.
Yep.
He's so unashamed about things he's been through, and like talking to people, being so upfront and honest with them. And I think I just feel I can be so honest because I'm like, you're human. You've been through stuff. Whatever your stuff is, whether it's the same as mine or like something way worse or not as bad, like we've all been in these really hard places, and it's like, why not be honest and vulnerable about this? Learned from that was I was more resilient than I realized. That I had built up this endurance that I would keep going. And it took me a while to bounce back from things, but over time, like especially this last year and a half, things will happen and I'll still hit hard and be really emotional, but I don't stay down as long.
When you started to bounce back quicker and you wouldn't stay down, that's when I knew that you were really making progress. Yeah. And just recently, last week, you were kind of in a dark place again. I saw you working through it and you were processing it, and you didn't stay there. And it's like I see you back to your bouncy, energetic, excited for life self.
I am a 7 on the Enneagram scale, 100%. I am Tigger.
But when you get totally excited over a new plant nanny,
No, but look, I bought a succulent. I walked into Target and I was like, yes, because I was just telling her, I was like, I just really wanted a plant, like something small I can nurture, because like I don't want to fish and I can't have a dog right now, and I really don't want a cat. So I was like, plant it is. And so we were literally talking about it in the car. And I looked up the names of Snoopy's brothers from the Peanuts. And his brother who like lives in the cactus name is Spike. So meet Spike. My cactus. What is so small? I was so dumb in the car. I was just like, I walked up to the window just being like, I was like, look what I bought. I think the medication has helped the most with bouncing back even quicker. Taking medication in July, because the summer was really hard. I was alone most of the summer and have discovered I can't thrive when I'm alone. High key an extrovert. I talk a lot about self-care. That'll be something I get more into with the series. The downside with not having the medication, me trying to practice those self-care habits and routines and didn't have like the stability that medication has brought me, because all those self-care routines and habits are really great, but if there's a true chemical imbalance in your brain, you can do those habits, but it's so much easier for you to get thrown off by something. And I never knew which Emily I was going to get in the morning, especially affected by sleep. I would freak out if I knew I was only going to get 6 hours of sleep, because I knew mentally like 6 hours of sleep and under is like awful for me, and I'm in a really bad mental place. And then starting medication, it's like that kind of becomes a new foundation to stand on to bring those habits back in, and they actually become grounded, and they're not just like, oh yeah, this day I'm disciplined and in my routine, and the next day I'm like laying in bed. And I still have the hard days and some days like where I don't stick to my routines, but I return to them because I know that they're what keeps me centered. My relationship with the Lord has changed everything, and I still struggle with figuring out how to talk about that on Instagram, because like my Instagram was built on just a lot of like empowerment and love and all the things, and all those are like so good, but it's like I saw a really huge complete transformation in July when I started reading the Bible more, which is a whole other topic I can get into more in depth, like sharing stories about how I grew up in church and how legalism and the rituals behind like religion, like I just like walked away from everything for a while, sat on the fence about it for a while, turned my back on it for a while. Had a friend challenge me, just sit and read. Don't try to like define things or journal or have like your cute little quiet time in the coffee shop and you're like everything's like perfectly positioned. You know, it's just like, just sit, just read. And I read through John, I read through Mark, Luke, Matthew. And the more that I did that, I like started meeting this Jesus that like most of the churches I grew up in did not teach. Like we just kind of taught this like big God who's like up in the heavens that like we praise every Sunday. And the Lord, through last semester of spending a lot of time with him, like returning to just a quiet place, like where I would just read when people say something's different about you, Emily, or like you're glowing, or there's something about your eyes and I don't know what it is. Yes, there's like lots of self-care and lots of self-love that I've adopted, but it's the Lord that you're seeing. The light that I talk about on my Instagram, that brave that I talk about, it all goes back to him. And I'm not ashamed to talk about that anymore. I think at like one point I was, only because I didn't know how to process all of it and still don't know where I stood with it. I've seen too much change coupled with medication and self-care and really good friends and cutting those toxic people out, him being the biggest one of it all. And I have a lot of respect for your stories. And if you've been burned by church or religion or God or disappointed or all of the things, there's so many conversations to be had about that. But being totally honest with you, that is what changed it all for me. So to wrap up this video, because I know this is very long at this point, what would be one thing you'd want to say to someone walking through a really dark place?
Like I said before, reach out to somebody and do not stay silent. Do not think that you have to go through this alone, or somebody's not going to understand, or it's going to be embarrassing. Most important thing is when you're in that dark place, not to stay silent, not to isolate yourself. And on the right medication is vital as well. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Yep. And we'll continue to have conversations about that. You know, I've got your back on that. However long this video wound up being, thank you so much for spending the time to watch this. I hope, if anything, you don't feel alone, that you feel like you can do something if you are struggling, if you just at least feel reminded that you're going to make it out of this, I promise.